Hello, and welcome back to the Sleep Lab. Tonight we're going to drift gently into the strangest, most tightly packed object in the known universe, the roughly 3-pound organ currently, quietly reading these very words, deciding how to feel about them, and preparing, soon, to carry you off into sleep. The human brain contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way, runs on about as much power as a dim household light bulb, and still, after centuries of careful study, remains genuinely, deeply mysterious in more ways than it has been fully explained. Tonight we're going to move through 100 small, strange, gentle facts about this remarkable organ, one detail after another, offered slowly enough to let each one settle softly before the next quietly arrives. Nothing tonight needs to be remembered. Your own brain, in its own patient way, will keep working long after you've forgotten every single fact you heard. If this kind of journey is worth your time, a like, a subscribe, or a thought left below helps this small lab keep its lights on for other sleepy minds finding their way here. But for now, there is nothing you need to do except settle in, let your body grow heavy, and let 100 strange truths about your own mind drift gently over you instead. Let's begin. 1. The human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each one capable of forming thousands of individual connections, producing a network more intricate than anything else known in the universe. 2. If you tried to count every neuron in your brain at a rate of 1 per second, without ever stopping to sleep or eat, it would take you well over 2,000 years to finish. 3. The brain has no pain receptors of its own, which is why neurosurgeons can perform certain procedures on a fully conscious, awake patient without causing them any pain at all. 4. Awake brain surgery is genuinely, regularly performed, particularly for procedures near regions controlling speech or movement, allowing surgeons to monitor brain function directly while the patient remains responsive throughout. 5. The brain uses roughly 20% of the body's total energy, despite making up only about 2% of total body weight, an extraordinarily disproportionate share. 6. This means your brain consumes a significant portion of every meal you eat, quietly powering thought, memory, and movement long before most of that energy ever reaches your muscles. 7. The brain is made up of roughly 73% water, meaning even mild dehydration can measurably affect concentration, mood, and short-term memory. 8. Your brain generates enough electrical activity to power a small light bulb, a fact researchers sometimes use to illustrate just how much of your body's own electricity is quietly, constantly at work inside your skull. 9. The brain's wrinkled, folded surface, called the cerebral cortex, exists specifically to increase surface area, allowing far more neurons to fit inside the limited space of the skull. 10. If the cerebral cortex were fully unfolded and flattened out, it would cover an area roughly the size of a large pillowcase. 11. The brain is not a single, uniform organ, but a collection of specialized regions, each responsible for different functions, from vision and language to balance and emotional regulation. 12. Despite popular myth, humans do not use only 10% of their brains, and modern brain imaging shows that nearly every region of the brain is active at some point across an ordinary day. 13. The myth likely originated from a misunderstanding of early neuroscience research, and it has persisted in popular culture for decades despite being thoroughly, repeatedly debunked by scientists. 14. Your brain continues developing until roughly your mid-20s, with the prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and long-term planning, among the very last regions to fully mature. 15. Certain brain cells, called neurons, generally do not regenerate the way skin or blood cells do, though scientists have discovered that a small number of new neurons can still form in specific brain regions throughout adulthood. 16. This process, called neurogenesis, occurs primarily within the hippocampus, a region deeply involved in learning and memory, suggesting the brain retains at least some capacity for genuine renewal. 17. The brain can rewire itself in response to injury or new experience, a property called neuroplasticity, allowing certain functions to sometimes shift to entirely different regions after damage. 18. Some stroke survivors have regained lost abilities, including speech and movement, through intensive therapy that gently encourages the brain to reroute those functions through healthy, undamaged tissue. 19. The brain does not actually feel time passing at a constant, steady rate, and perceived time can genuinely speed up or slow down depending on emotional state, novelty, and attention. 20. This is part of why a frightening or dangerous moment can feel, in memory, as though it unfolded in slow motion, even though it happened at completely ordinary speed. 21. Your brain fills in gaps in your vision constantly, including the natural blind spot created where the optic nerve connects to the retina, without you ever consciously noticing the missing information. 22. The brain also flips the image received by your eyes right side up, since the raw image projected onto the retina actually arrives upside down before your visual cortex quietly, automatically corrects it. 23. Your brain can be fooled by optical illusions specifically because it constantly relies on shortcuts and assumptions to interpret visual information quickly, rather than analyzing every detail from scratch each time. 24. Déjà vu, the eerie feeling of having experienced a new moment before, is believed to result from a brief, harmless mismatch between memory processing regions of the brain. 25. Most people experience déjà vu at least occasionally, and it appears to occur more frequently in younger adults, gradually becoming less common as people age. 26. The brain can create entirely false memories, and controlled psychological studies have successfully implanted convincing but entirely fabricated memories in willing research participants. 27. Eyewitness testimony, once considered highly reliable in courtrooms, is now understood by researchers to be genuinely vulnerable to these same kinds of subtle memory distortions. 28. Every time you recall a memory, your brain doesn't simply replay it like a recording, but subtly reconstructs it, which means memories can shift slightly each time they are remembered. 29. This reconstructive process is part of why two people who witnessed the very same event can walk away with genuinely, honestly different memories of exactly what happened. 30. We've reached the first third of tonight's list. Somewhere, right now, your own brain is quietly reconstructing a memory, filling gaps, and correcting an image, all without asking your permission. 31. The brain's two hemispheres are connected by a thick band of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum, allowing the left and right sides to constantly share information with one another. 32. In rare medical cases where the corpus callosum has been surgically severed, researchers have observed genuinely strange effects, including each hemisphere sometimes processing information almost independently of the other. 33. The popular idea that people are strictly left-brained or right-brained thinkers has been thoroughly debunked by brain imaging, which shows both hemispheres working together for nearly every mental task. 34. Your sense of smell is more directly connected to memory and emotion than any of your other senses, since smell signals travel to the brain through a pathway closely linked to memory-forming regions. 35. This is part of why a specific, unexpected scent can trigger a sudden, vivid memory, sometimes decades old, far more powerfully than a sound or an image ever could. 36. The brain processes fear and other emotions through the amygdala, a small, almond-shaped structure that can trigger a full-body stress response before conscious thought even has time to catch up. 37. This is why you might flinch away from something startling before you've even consciously registered what it actually was, your amygdala reacting faster than your slower, more deliberate thinking. 38. The brain can experience genuine withdrawal-like effects from social rejection, with brain imaging showing that social pain activates some of the very same regions responsible for processing physical pain. 39. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins and activates multiple brain regions simultaneously, which is part of why genuine laughter so often leaves people feeling measurably lighter and more relaxed afterward. 40. The brain can become measurably more active during daydreaming than during focused, deliberate tasks, a phenomenon linked to what researchers call the brain's default mode network. 41. This default mode network appears to play an important role in creativity, self-reflection, and future planning, suggesting that idle daydreaming is far from wasted mental time. 42. Some of history's most celebrated creative breakthroughs are reported to have occurred during quiet, unfocused moments, in the shower, on a walk, precisely when the mind was free to wander. 43. The brain's short-term memory can typically hold only around 4 to 7 pieces of information at once, part of why long phone numbers or lists become genuinely difficult to remember without repetition. 44. Sleep plays an essential role in transferring short-term memories into more stable, long-term storage, which is part of why a full night's rest so often improves recall the following day. 45. The brain remains genuinely active throughout sleep, and far from simply shutting down, it continues processing memories, regulating emotion, and even generating the vivid experience of dreaming. 46. Some people experience a phenomenon called exploding head syndrome, a harmless but genuinely startling sensation of a loud noise or flash occurring in the brain while falling asleep. 47. The brain's temporal lobes, involved in processing sound and language, can sometimes misfire in ways that produce this strange, sudden sensation, though researchers still don't fully understand why it happens. 48. Your brain can technically continue showing measurable electrical activity for a short period after clinical death, a phenomenon researchers are still working to fully understand. 49. The brain's capacity for storage is estimated, by some calculations, to be roughly equivalent to about 2.5 million gigabytes, though comparing a living brain to a computer remains an imperfect analogy at best. 50. We've reached the halfway point of tonight's list. Somewhere, right now, your own brain is quietly storing away a small piece of tonight, whether you notice it happening or not. 51. The brain does not have a single, centralized location where memories are stored, but instead distributes different aspects of a single memory across multiple interconnected regions. 52. This distributed storage is part of why brain damage in one specific area can sometimes affect only part of a memory, such as losing the emotional quality of an event while still recalling the basic facts. 53. Some people possess a rare condition called highly superior autobiographical memory, allowing them to recall an extraordinary number of specific personal details from almost any given day of their past life. 54. At the opposite extreme, some individuals with certain kinds of brain damage develop a condition where they cannot form any new long-term memories at all, remaining permanently anchored to a single moment in time. 55. The brain can adapt to sensory loss in genuinely striking ways, and studies have found that blind individuals often show heightened activity in their visual cortex while processing sound or touch instead. 60. This kind of cross-sensory reorganization suggests the brain is remarkably flexible about which regions handle which jobs, repurposing unused capacity rather than simply leaving it dormant. 56. Musicians who begin training at a young age often show measurable structural differences in brain regions associated with movement, hearing, and coordination compared to non-musicians. 57. London taxi drivers, who must memorize the city's extraordinarily complex street layout for a famously difficult licensing exam, have been found to develop a measurably larger hippocampus as a result of that training. 58. The brain's reward system, driven largely by the neurotransmitter dopamine, plays a central role in motivation, learning, and the pursuit of nearly any goal, from finishing a task to falling in love. 59. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is more closely tied to the anticipation of reward than to the pleasure of actually receiving it, part of why anticipation itself can feel so genuinely exciting. 61. The brain can experience genuine physical symptoms from purely psychological causes, a well-documented phenomenon researchers call the placebo effect, in which belief alone can trigger measurable, real physiological change. 62. In some documented cases, patients given a placebo treatment for pain have shown brain activity changes nearly identical to those triggered by genuine, active pain medication. 63. The brain's mirror neurons, first identified in the 1990s, activate both when a person performs an action and when they simply observe someone else performing that very same action. 64. Mirror neurons are believed to play an important role in empathy and social learning, helping explain why watching someone yawn, or wince in pain, can trigger a genuine, felt response in the observer. 65. Yawning itself remains only partially understood by science, though it is genuinely, measurably contagious, and even reading about yawning, as you may be noticing right about now, can trigger the very same urge. 67. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for impulse control and careful decision-making, is one of the last regions to fully develop, which helps explain certain patterns of risk-taking common during adolescence. 68. Some brain functions are surprisingly automatic, and the brainstem alone manages breathing, heart rate, and other essential survival functions entirely without any need for conscious thought or effort. 69. The cerebellum, once believed to handle only movement and balance, is now understood to also play a genuine, active role in certain aspects of language, attention, and emotional processing. 70. Your brain can technically survive with surprisingly little tissue in rare medical cases, and some documented patients missing significant portions of brain tissue have continued to live relatively ordinary, functional lives. 71. These rare cases suggest a genuine, if still not fully understood, degree of redundancy and adaptability built directly into the brain's overall structure. 72. The brain does not experience the world in real time, but with a small, consistent processing delay, meaning what you perceive as now is actually built from information gathered a fraction of a second earlier. 73. Some researchers believe the brain compensates for this delay by subtly predicting the immediate future, which is part of why perfectly timed actions, like catching a fast-moving ball, feel effortlessly instant. 74. The brain can be trained to notice, or entirely ignore, specific stimuli through a process called selective attention, part of why you can hear your own name spoken across a genuinely crowded, noisy room. 75. This phenomenon, sometimes called the cocktail party effect, demonstrates how much filtering your brain quietly performs on incoming sound before any of it ever reaches your conscious awareness. 76. Music activates an unusually wide, distributed network across the brain, involving regions responsible for memory, movement, and emotion nearly simultaneously, part of why music can feel so uniquely, powerfully immersive. 77. Some people experience a rare condition called synesthesia, in which stimulation of one sense triggers an involuntary, genuine experience in another, such as seeing specific colors when hearing certain musical notes. 78. Synesthesia is believed to result from unusually dense cross-wiring between different sensory regions of the brain, offering researchers valuable insight into how the senses ordinarily stay separate. 79. The brain's language centers, primarily Broca's area and Wernicke's area, were identified in the 19th century through careful study of patients who had lost specific, distinct language abilities after localized brain injury. 80. Damage to Broca's area typically affects a person's ability to produce fluent speech, while damage to Wernicke's area typically affects their ability to properly understand language, a striking, well-documented distinction. 81. Learning a new language, even later in adulthood, can produce measurable structural changes in the brain, part of a broader body of evidence showing the adult brain remains genuinely capable of significant, lasting change. 82. The brain's ability to change through experience does gradually slow with age, though research increasingly suggests genuine neuroplasticity continues, in some meaningful form, throughout an entire human lifetime. 83. Chronic stress has been shown to physically shrink certain brain regions, particularly the hippocampus, while enlarging others, including the amygdala, a genuine, measurable cost of prolonged, unmanaged pressure. 84. Regular physical exercise has been shown to support brain health directly, promoting the growth of new blood vessels and even encouraging the formation of new neurons in certain brain regions. 85. Meditation practiced consistently over time has been associated with measurable structural changes in brain regions linked to attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. 86. The brain's default response to uncertainty and ambiguity tends to be mild anxiety, an evolved survival mechanism that once helped our ancestors remain appropriately cautious in a genuinely unpredictable world. 87. Some brain research suggests that acts of genuine kindness activate reward-related brain regions similarly to receiving a reward yourself, part of why helping others so often feels quietly, genuinely good. 88. The brain continues to develop new neural pathways every time you learn something new, meaning your brain tonight is, quite literally, structurally different from the brain you had reading the very first fact of this list. 89. Some animals possess brains proportionally larger than humans relative to body size, though human intelligence appears to depend more on the brain's specific structure and connectivity than on its raw, overall size alone. 90. The human brain's prefrontal cortex is proportionally larger than that of most other animals, closely tied to our species' unusual capacity for planning, abstract reasoning, and long-term thinking. 91. Octopuses, despite being invertebrates, have remarkably sophisticated brains, along with additional neural clusters distributed throughout their arms, allowing surprisingly independent, localized decision-making in each limb. 92. The brain's ability to recognize faces is so specialized that a specific region, called the fusiform face area, is believed to be dedicated almost entirely to this single, important task. 93. Damage to this specific region can result in a rare condition called prosopagnosia, or face blindness, in which a person struggles to recognize even close, familiar family members by sight alone. 94. The brain can experience phantom limb sensations after amputation, genuinely, vividly feeling a limb that is no longer physically present, a striking demonstration of how deeply body awareness is rooted in brain activity rather than the body itself. 95. Mirror therapy, using a simple mirror to visually restore a missing limb, has been shown to genuinely help some patients find relief from phantom limb pain by gently retraining the brain's own body map. 96. The brain's capacity for empathy appears to begin developing remarkably early, with even very young infants showing measurable distress in response to another infant's crying nearby. 97. Your brain uses roughly the same amount of energy whether you are actively solving a difficult problem or simply resting quietly, since so much of its baseline activity continues regardless of deliberate mental effort. 98. Despite centuries of dedicated study, neuroscientists still do not fully understand exactly how consciousness itself arises from the physical activity of neurons, one of the deepest, most genuinely unresolved mysteries in all of science. 99. Every single thought, memory, and feeling you have ever had was generated by the very same 3-pound organ currently, quietly reading, or rather, listening to, these very words right now. 100. And perhaps the strangest, most wonderful truth of all is simply this, that somewhere inside your own skull tonight, an entire universe of thought, feeling, and memory is quietly, faithfully getting ready to rest. We have reached the end of tonight's 100 strange, gentle truths about the organ currently carrying you toward sleep. We touched neurons too numerous to count and memories that quietly reshape themselves each time they're recalled, mirror neurons that echo another's pain and a default mode network humming quietly during idle daydreams. We remembered London's taxi drivers with their expanded hippocampus, phantom limbs still vividly felt, and an entire, unresolved mystery still sitting at the very center of neuroscience: how mere neurons ever become something that feels like being you. There is something gently worth carrying from a list built entirely around something so close, so constant, and so quietly mysterious, a reminder that the very mind holding all of tonight's small facts is, itself, one of the strangest, least fully understood things in the entire known universe. If tonight's 100 strange truths were worth your time, a like, a subscribe, or a thought left below helps the Sleep Lab stay open for the next curious, sleepy mind who finds their way here. And if you're still awake, there's another story waiting just beyond this one, whenever you're ready for it. But for now, let your own remarkable brain begin its quiet, familiar work, sorting today gently away and preparing softly for tomorrow. Let your body grow heavy. Let your breathing slow. Sleep well. And good night.